So we'll start with the class Introduction to Post-Transcriptional Modifications. So last class we have studied about gene silencing and all that. So in this class we know that after transcription, in case of eukaryotes, transcription and translation takes place in different compartments. That is, transcription will take place in the nucleus, whereas translation will take place in the cytosol. But in prokaryotes, what happens is transcription and translation both occurs together. Okay, they occur simultaneously. Thus, what happens is that in case of eukaryotes, mRNA, in the case of prokaryotes, there is very little post-transcriptional modification. But in the case of eukaryotes, there is an extensive post-transcriptional modification which is seen. Okay, so both the tRNA and the ribosomal RNA, rRNA, undergoes processing. They undergo certain changes like cleavage, certain nucleotides will be added, certain chemical modifications will take place. Okay, so although both the prokaryotes and the eukaryotes, they modify the pre-tRNA, eukaryotes very extensively process the pre-mRNA to become mRNA. So once the pre-mRNA is formed, it has to become mRNA. So the primary transcript of an RNA polymerase is called as the pre-RNA. We have studied in transcription that first a primary transcript of an RNA is produced. So what happens in that, we'll study in this class. So post-transcriptional modifications. Okay, so the central dogma we know refers to the flow of information flows from DNA to RNA to protein. So DNA encodes all the genetic information for most of the species. So this is just a central dogma of molecular biology that we have already discussed, how information is transferred from DNA to RNA to protein. So in transcription is the process of synthesis of RNA from a DNA template. Okay, so in transcription, whether prokaryotic or eukaryotic, has three main events. It has initiation, elongation, and termination. So what is post-transcriptional modifications, also called as RNA processing? So it is a process by which the primary transcript RNA is converted into mature RNA. So, and although it is critical to the eukaryotic mRNA, it is responsible for changes in rRNA, tRNA, and other special function RNAs too. Okay, so you have primary transcript RNA. So this will be converted to mature RNA. So mostly it is the mRNA processing which is mainly studied extensively, although tRNA and rRNA changes are also seen. So what does it involve? It involves modification of ribosomal RNA. So that is, pre-rRNA synthesized as large precursors are further cut to yield mature size rRNA. Okay, so the modification of SNO RNA takes place. Small nuclear organizer RNA, SNO rRNA precursors are cleaved and attacked upon by ribonucleases to produce functional SNO rRNAs. So precursors means something which is produced before a mature rRNA is SNO rRNA is produced. So modification, first let's go to modification of mRNA. So the conversion of pre-mRNA to mature rRNA takes place by three methods. You have 5' end capping, you have either the 3' end polyadenylation and splicing. These three are the mechanisms which are mainly seen in the case of RNA processing. That is, the DNA strand is transcribed. So you have a 5' end which is capped, okay, with the modified nucleotide. So capping takes place, the process of capping. Then a poly A tail will be added to at the 3' end, and then the exons, introns would be removed, and then the exons will be joined, and a mature mRNA will be then transported into the cytosol, and thus translation can begin. So modification of snRNA. Synthesized snRNA, if you see, they are usually synthesized as pre-snRNA, and then they are subjected to cleavage and processing. Okay, so if you consider tRNA, that's transfer RNA, conversion of pre-tRNA to mature tRNA. So there will be certain modification, bases would be modified. You know about the pseudo-uridine loop and all those things. So all those certain bases would be modified. Then also certain introns will be removed. from the tRNA. So what is the significance of post-transcriptional modifications? First is to modification mainly helps the RNA molecule to be recognized by molecules that mediate RNA translation into proteins. For example, after transcription, translation takes place. So there are certain enzymes which are involved. So if the RNA is still in the precursor or the pre-mRNA stage, then it won't be recognized by the molecule. So it's more these modifications help the RNA molecule to be recognized by molecules that mediate RNA translation into proteins. So during post-transcriptional processing, portions of the RNA chain that are not supposed to be translated into proteins are cut out of the sequence. That's like, for example, if you have certain sequences which are not required for, like for example, introns. Introns are non-coding sequences, so they are not required for forming proteins. So they will be removed. So non-required sequences or unused sequences are removed from the RNA chain and they are cut out, and thus it helps to increase the efficiency of protein synthesis. Then post-transcriptional modifications of rRNA, post-transcriptional modifications in SNO-RNA. So first we will study the post-transcriptional modifications of rRNA. So ribosomal RNA transcriptional modification takes place both in prokaryotic as well as eukaryotic rRNAs. Eukaryotic ribosomes have 4 distinct ribosomal rRNAs. Okay, in humans, if you see the large subunits, you know about the subunits of ribosomes. You have 28S, 5.8S, 5S, okay, and 18S rRNA, all those things. So in humans, the large subunits are the 28S, 5.8S, and the 5S rRNA, and a small subunit contains the 18S RNA. So out of these 3 RNA are carved by various nucleases by a single transcript rRNA. So the 5S rRNA is synthesized from a separate RNA precursor outside the nucleolus. So these subunits synthesize the rRNA, which are then form the primary transcript. Okay. So in eukaryotes, if you see, in eukaryotes, 45S pre-rRNA is synthesized by RNA polymerase 1 and processed in the nucleolus to form 18S, 28S, and 5.8S. So you can see that 90S pre-ribosome, it has it's made up of 18S, 5.8S, and 28S. This will be then synthesized to form the 48 of it will be pre-synthesized from the 45S pre-RNA. Then for it radioactively labeled methionine is used. So methyl group is transferred from methionine to nucleotide. So as a result, 45S rRNA is cleaved into smaller molecules. So here this is a schematic representation as to how and where it takes place. So initially it will be in the nucleus, and then the ribosomes will be in the cytoplasm. How it is from pre-ribosome stage, how mature ribosomal subunits are formed. So this is the process. Then if you consider bacteria, in bacteria it is the slightly modifications of the subunits. You have 6S rRNA, 23S rRNA, and 5S rRNA, which mainly arise from a single 30S rRNA precursor. Okay, it arises from a 30S rRNA precursor, which is around 6,500 nucleotides in length. So here what happens is that from the single 30S rRNA, methylation and pseudouridine or dihydrouridine conversion takes place, and then it will be cleaved to form certain intermediates, and from the intermediates you will have the mature rRNAs, which are formed 16S, 23S, and 5S. So you have to remember in prokaryotes which are the ribosomes, which are the subunits present, and eukaryotes which are the 28S is there in eukaryotes, 23S is in prokaryotes, bacteria. So that difference you should know. Okay, from where it is, what is the initial RNA precursor, and from that RNA precursor, smaller subunits of the bacteria are mainly formed. So in 16S rRNA of E. coli, 11 modifications are of pseudouridine and 10 are of nucleosides methylated on the base. So most common modifications are seen in the pseudouridine as well as methylation on the bases. So in humans, if mutations of enzymes occur, then there are chances of dyskeratosis. Okay, in this case, so you can see that these are the sugars, ribose sugar and deoxyribose pseudouridine sugars and all those things, bases. And here they are methylated. So in the case of methylation, what happens is that guanosine will be methylated to 1-methyl guanosine. Like that, several other bases, ribothiamidine. Okay, thymidine, thymine will be modified to ribothymidine. So uracil also will be modified similarly. So in this, you should remember that pseudouridine as well as nucleoside methylation on the bases, they are mainly commonly seen. So then coming to synthesis and processing of 5S and 5.8S rRNA. 5S and 5.8S rRNA. 5S is present in prokaryotes and 5.8S is present in eukaryotes. So in eukaryotes, they are encoded by large number of identical genes. Okay, large number of genes encode these ribosomal subunits. So these genes will be then transcribed by RNA polymerase 3. So it is unusual among polymerases that it can bind to a promoter site located within the transcribed portion of the target gene. So for example, if the internal promoter from a 5S rRNA is inserted into another region of the genome, the new site becomes a template for transcription by RNA polymerase. That is, if the promoter from a 5S rRNA is inserted into another region by genetically modified and inserted into another region of the genome, then this new site will become the template for the transcription by RNA polymerase 3. Okay. Then coming to processing of small nuclear rRNAs. So the processing of pre-rRNA is accomplished with the help of a large number of small nucleolar rRNAs that are packaged with particular proteins to form particles called SNO-RNPs. So the first ribonucleoprotein particle, which is mainly attached to the pre-rRNA transcript, usually contains the uridine, U3 SNO-rRNA, and there are many different types of it. And usually the SNO-rRNAs are present at lower concentration, and you have two types, two classes, box CD SNO-rRNAs and second is box HACA SNO-rRNAs. Both groups are long stretches of 10 to 21 nucleotides. So I'll give you an assignment for today. That is next week on Thursday. I need everyone to submit a short, like a 2 or 3 page short notes, like with the figures on SNO-rRNAs. Okay. Is everyone listen to this? SNO-rRNAs. Try to make a short notes. Okay, what is it? And like a bit how it is processed in the cell. So just try to write an assignment or 2 to 3 pages assignment and submit it. You can just send it by mail to me. Okay. Hope everyone is listening to the class.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, fine. So each SNO-rRNA binds to the specific portion of the pre-ribosomal RNA to form RNA-RNA duplex. So if the gene which mainly encodes these SNO-rRNAs is deleted, one of the nucleotides of the pre-RNA will be fails to be enzymatically modified. So the genes would have to be like if there is some kind of a deletion in these genes, then what happens is that the pre-ribosomal RNA won't be enzymatically modified. Okay. Now, mRNA post-transcriptional modification. So first is the important 5' capping, and next is polyadenylation. So mRNA processing, primary mRNA is processed first and then transported into the cytoplasm. Okay, mRNA fate is its complete and regulated degradation. 3 main steps are there mainly in mRNA processing. They are the 5' capping, the polyadenylation, and then the splicing. Poly-A tail is usually added at the 3' end. So in this process, what happens basically is that one subunit of during this transcription process, 7-methyl guanosine is added to the 5' end of the nascent mRNA. Okay, so the initial steps in the RNA capping are catalyzed by an enzyme. That is, it is catalyzed by a dimeric capping enzyme. So first you have the DNA from which you have synthesized the pre-mRNA. So then capping takes place. So once the capping, in the sense, what happens is that there are certain methyl groups which are added. Okay, the reactions that cap the 5' end of each RNA molecule is synthesized by the RNA polymerase II itself. So the final cap contains a 5' to 5 diphosphate linkage will be mainly seen between the 7-methyl guanosine residue. So here you will have a mature mRNA which is formed. So capping, mainly you have the process of adding certain methyl groups. Okay, so the methyl groups will, what is the functions of this 5' cap? The main functions of the 5' cap is to protect the mRNA from degradation. First point is that to protect mRNA from degradation. Second is to transport the mRNA. It helps in the transportation of the mRNA from the nucleus to the cytoplasm, and then binding of the ribosome with the mRNA. The ribosome will be then bound with the mRNA. So the 5' cap is mainly consists of a residue of 7-methyl guanosine, and it protects the mRNA from RNases, that is ribonucleases. The cap is added after the first 20 to 30 nucleotides of the mRNA have been synthesized, and it is linked to the 5' terminal residue of the mRNA by an unusual 5' triphosphate linkage. So this is how the cap is added, and the functions of the cap is mainly to protect the mRNA from degradation and to transport the mRNA from the nucleus to the cytoplasm. And binding of the ribosome, it also aids in the binding of the ribosomes with the mRNA. There are three main steps. First step is from the 5' triphosphate end of the mRNA, the phosphohydrose. Now we'll see the enzymes, okay, which take part in this. There are three main enzymes which take part in this capping process, 5' capping. First is the phosphohydrolase enzyme. Second one is the guanyl transferase enzyme. And third one is the guanine 7-methyl transferase enzyme. So first is the phosphohydrolase enzyme. This phosphohydrolase enzyme, what it does is, from the 5' triphosphate end of the mRNA, the phosphohydrolase enzyme cleaves one phosphate group. That is, one phosphate group will be removed from the 5' end of the mRNA. Second step, what happens? This guanyl transferase enzyme will cleave the two phosphate bonds from the guanosine residue and form an unusual 5' triphosphate bond with the 5' end of the mRNA, that is with the 2-phosphate. So the second step is okay. So this picture is better. So here you have the phosphate group which is mainly removed from the mRNA, and then you have this guanyl transferase enzyme. This guanyl transferase enzyme, basically what it does is, it will cleave the two phosphate bonds from the guanosine residue. So from the guanosine residue, it will cleave the two phosphate bonds. Okay, so PPI, that is 2 phosphate bonds, will be then removed. Then this guanine 7-methyl transferase will add a methyl group at the 7th position of the guanine base. So if you just have to know the 4 structures: adenine, guanine, cytosine, thymine, and where is the 7th position, 7th carbon atom. That if you know, then you will know that at the 7th position of the guanine base, the methyl group will be added. Methyl transferase will add a methyl group. So the methyl group is mainly, where is it derived from? It is mainly derived from S-adenosyl methionine. That is SAM, S-adenosyl methionine. Okay. So methyl group is now added. Now methyl group sometimes also added at the 2' OH of the nucleotides adjacent to the cap. This is done by the enzyme 2-O-methyl transferase. So 2-O-methyl transferase will add what? Methyl group sometimes added to the 2' OH adjacent to the cap. So methyl group is then added. So then you have this another methyl group which is added to the 7th position. So you have the 5' end of the RNA with the cap. So this cap mainly protects the mRNA from getting degraded by ribonucleases, and also helps in the binding of the ribosome with the mRNA. Because for translation to take place, that we'll study in the next unit, this ribosome is mainly required, right? Ribosome along with the mRNA, certain events takes place, and then the mRNA will be then translated into protein. Okay, so that is about 5' capping. So you should know which are the enzymes which are involved in the 5' capping, and three main enzymes, and why this capping is important. What are the functions of this capping? And those are the points which are very important in 5' capping. Next coming to polyadenylation or addition of poly A tail. So usually most of the eukaryotic mRNAs have around 250 adenosine. Okay, 215 adenosines will be present at the 3' end, called the poly A tail. So why you require poly A tail? So this poly A tail acts as a binding site for specific proteins. Okay, poly A tail. Why do we need a poly A tail? It acts as a binding site for specific proteins that protects the mRNA from enzymatic degradation. It's similar to the 5' capping. It's also here the 3' poly A tail helps to prevent it protects the mRNA from enzymatic degradation. And mRNA synthesized beyond the region where the poly A tail is to be added. So the poly A tail is not specified by the DNA, and it is mainly added to the transcript by template independent polymerase. So which is the enzyme which is mainly involved in adding this poly A tail? It is called PAP, that is poly A polymerase. Okay, it's a template, it's an RNA polymerase. It's also called PAP, PAP, poly A polymerase. Okay, so these two coupled reactions are collectively referred to as cleavage and polyadenylation. So we'll see how it is. Two main steps are mainly required for adding the poly A tail. First is cleavage of mRNA at 3' end, and then you have the addition of adenine residues. So a cleavage sequence is usually a CA sequence. Okay, a CA sequence is the site for cleavage. Then polyadenylation signal sequence will mainly added. That is poly A. A number of A residues, adenosine residues will be added. Then you have this GU-rich sequence, which is mainly present at the 20 to 40 nucleotides downstream to the cleavage site. So for any process to take place, that is, you require for an enzyme for cleavage or polyadenylation, you need to have some kind of a signal sequence, right? In mammals, if you see, the polyadenylation is mainly directed by signal sequence called the poly A signal. Okay, so that is usually AAUAAA. This is the polyadenylation signal sequence. So it is usually located 10 to 30 nucleotides upstream of the cleavage site. Okay, so so at that particular site, this cleavage will mainly takes place. Okay, and both the poly A sequence, and also you have the downstream of this polyadenylation site, you have the GU-rich region. Okay, so if you see this structure, can you see this figure on the screen, on your mobile screen or laptop? Can you see this?
Yes, ma'am.
AAUAAA and then GU. Okay, so this is the signal sequence. Signal sequence, you have the signal sequence, and GU-rich region also will be there. So in between these two regions, you will have the poly A site. So this is the site where the cleavage takes place, and the adenosine residues will be mainly added. So next coming to CPSF. Okay, so now you know that both the poly A signal sequence, that is AAUAA, and the GU-rich sequence are binding sites for multi-subunit protein complexes. Okay, so you know that the poly A sequence as well as the GU-rich sequence are mainly the sites of binding of a high multi-subunit complex. That is CPSF stands for cleavage and polyadenylation specificity factor. Okay, so this factor is very important for the generation of the poly A tail. So what does this factor consist of? It's a multi-subunit enzyme. Okay, so this enzyme basically includes an endonuclease, it includes a polyadenylate polymerase and several other multi-subunit proteins. Okay, and it's a huge enzyme complex, and the proteins involved are mainly involved in sequence recognition. It's involved in stimulation of cleavage and also regulation of the length of the poly A tail. So these are the functions of the CPSF. So this is how this process takes place. It's shown like with the ribosomes, the polymerase, how it comes and binds, and how the cleavage takes place. The endonuclease comes out, and the endonuclease acts and removes the sequence, and then the adenosine residues will be mainly added to form the poly A tail. Then coming to, I told you that the third important mechanism of post-transcriptional modifications is splicing. So what is splicing? Splicing mainly involves the removal of the introns and the non-coding sequences. So in introns also you have group 1 introns and group 2 introns. So there are two groups of introns which are mainly present. So non-coding DNA has to be removed. So for this purpose, like usually if you see the structure of a genome, it is not like the coding sequences itself. It is interspersed by non-coding sequences or intervening sequences. These intervening sequences are non-coding regions, and to yield a complete protein, these non-coding sequences have to be removed. So the entire gene is transcribed to yield a long RNA molecule. Then the introns will be removed, exons will be joined. So this entire process is called as splicing, RNA splicing. So the mechanism of this RNA splicing varies depending upon the type of the introns. Okay, there are many types of pre-mRNA introns. Two types are there, GUAG and AUAC introns. Okay, and so we'll see that how the splicing mechanism varies. So splicing of messenger RNA. So the removal of introns from the primary mRNA transcript is known as RNA splicing. So you have an exon, and you have it is interspersed with an intron between the two exons. Then you have the RNA precursor. So transcription takes place, and then RNA splicing will take place. So here you can see after the splicing, what happens is that this intron is removed, and you have these two exons which is mainly joined together, and then it will be translated to form a mature protein. So this is just a simple representation as to how the RNA splicing takes place. So the basic splicing machinery recognizes the exon-intron boundary due to how does this splicing machinery recognize this the site where the intron is present? Because there are certain conserved nucleotide sequences in the splice site. Okay, there are certain conserved nucleoside regions are there in the splice site. And also you have preferred nucleotide sequences in intron and exonic enhancers present in exon. So this figure is important. Like it shows which is the 5' splice site. This is the which is a 3' splice site. Okay, and where exactly it can cleave. So you have always you will have a 5' splice site. It's also called as a donor site, and the 3' splice site is also called as a right or the acceptor site. This 5' splice site is called as a left or the donor site. This is called as the acceptor site or the left side. Sorry, the right side. Right. This is on the right side. This is on the left side. So sometimes what happens, a branch point will also be present. Okay. So that we'll refer to later. Then coming to the 4 classes of introns. Okay. So you have group 1, group 2, group 3, and group 4 type of introns. Group 3 is also called as spliceosomal introns, and group 4 is also, it is found in certain tRNAs. So group 1 introns are self-splicing. Okay, that is, there no protein or enzymes are involved. They are usually found in some nuclear, mitochondrial, and chloroplast genes that code for rRNAs, mRNAs, and tRNAs. And it does not require any high energy factors or ATP because they are self-splicing. So this mechanism of self-splicing of introns was first observed in the case of group 1 rRNA in Tetrahymena thermophila, okay, by Thomas Sheck and colleagues in 1982. So it was first observed in this particular organism. So this is the structure of the group 1 introns. Okay, so here you have the 5' splice site. This is the 3' splice site, and you have an internal guide sequence. So this guide sequence will mainly determine, or the sequence of the guide sequence will mainly determine as to where the splice site is in the particular mRNA sequence. So how does the mechanism takes place? The splicing mechanisms mainly involves two transesterification steps. Okay, so first in the transesterification step, there is a nucleophilic attack. Okay, a nucleophilic attack will mainly takes place. So first reaction, basically what happens is that there is an ester bond between the 5' phosphate of the intron and the 3' oxygen of the exon 1. So this is if you consider the exon 1 and this is the intron. So in the first reaction, the ester bond, okay, the ester bond, in chemistry you must have studied the OH bond hydroxyl group. So the ester bond is the double bond O group, right? Ester bond, which is mainly present. Anyone knows what the ester bond is? I'm not too sure about the ester bond. Does anyone know what an ester bond is?
Not sure, ma'am.
Okay, you just have to read through it. Ester bond. So, in the this transesterification reaction, what happens is that the ester bond between the 5' phosphorus of the intron. So if this is the intron, you have the 5' phosphorus of the intron that will attack. Okay, that will attack the OH group and the 3 oxygen of the exon with the for an ester bond. So in the second reaction, what happens? The ester bond between the 5' phosphorus of the exon 2 and the 3' oxygen of the intron will be exchanged. So this you have to just remember that there is two transesterification reactions taking place, and an ester bond will be exchanged for an ester bond. That is, the position of the ester bond will be changed from within the between the exon and the intron.
Okay, ma'am.
Yeah. So if you just go through the structures in your textbook, you can see the two transesterification reactions which takes place. First transesterification reaction, you can just represent it with the structure. No need of chemical like structures like this. You can just say exon 1, and then you can show how it is. It is there in most of the textbooks. It is there how it is represented. Exon 1, you have an intron and an exon 2. And between that, where exactly the transesterification reactions takes place, and a lariat structure will be mainly formed. That is, a curved lariat structure will be formed. So here you have a primary transcript. So this is okay. This you can understand. So ester bond, this will be transferred. This is for the primary transcript exon, and this is for the intron. And then this will be removed. This region will be mainly removed, and then you have the mature RNA, which is mainly formed. So this structure will be mainly the intron. Non-coding sequence will be then removed. So then coming to group 2 introns. So just like group 1 introns, group 2 introns are also self-splicing. However, they are positioned, that is, they are usually group 2 introns are found in the primary transcripts of mitochondria or chloroplast mRNAs in fungi, algae, plants, and protists. Okay, and usually sometimes these group 2 introns are also mobile genetic elements, that is they function as transposons. So the structure of group 2 introns. So the group 2 introns fold into a conserved secondary structure. Okay, it folds into a conserved secondary structure. It usually consists of 6 domains. Okay, which is arranged around a central wheel. So here you have the domain 1, domain 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so this is how the group 2 introns would be mainly located. And domain 6 usually contains, this is the domain 6. Domain 6 contains a bulged adenosine residue, whose 2-OH group is the nucleophile that initiates the splicing reaction. So the 2-OH group of this adenosine of this domain 6, that is the one which acts as the nucleophile that mainly initiates the splicing reaction. Whereas the domain 4 encodes the intron. Okay, so domain 4 encodes the intron. So how does the splicing mainly takes place? So I've told you that in domain 6, the adenosine, the 2' OH group acts as the nucleophile. It mainly attacks the exon 1, the 3' end of the exon, and then again 2 transesterification reactions takes place, and the non-coding sequence, that is the intron, will be removed like the lariat structure. It is somewhat similar to the group 1 intron splicing reaction. However, here you have the specific sequence, specific site, that is the adenosine site, which is mainly the bulged adenosine residue here, the adenosine residue that acts as a nucleophile. So the splicing mechanism of group 3 and group 4 introns we'll see. Then you have also alternative splicing and post-transcriptional modifications of snRNAs. So group 3 introns, they are the largest class of introns. Okay, they are not self-splicing in nature. Till now we have seen group 1 and group 2 introns. They are all self-splicing. But here group 3 introns are non-self-splicing. Okay, they are usually referred to, group 3 introns are usually referred to as spliceosomal introns. So the splicing mechanism of group 3 introns. So the spliceosome mechanism is mainly so here the RNA splicing is catalyzed by a spliceosome formed from the assembly. Okay, so here you have an assembly of certain complexes. So what does a spliceosome? What is a spliceosome? So in spliceosome, what it means that this snRNPs together with the non-snRNP proteins attached to the transcript. Okay, so you have a series of snRNPs, that is SNRPs. You usually pronounce it as SNRPs, snRNP, small nuclear ribonucleoproteins. So SNRPs usually snRNPs and non-snRNP proteins attached mainly to a transcript. Okay, that transcript is a pre-mRNA transcript to form a series of complex, and this complex of the primary mRNA transcript and the SNRP and this SNRP proteins, they are called as a spliceosome. Okay, so here you have the role of so here you have GUAG group of introns. So initially I've told you there are two groups of introns. Depending upon, you have GUAG group of introns. In this, there are two groups of had mentioned that there were two groups of introns, GUAG group. So today, in this we were in group 3 introns, we are studying about GUAG group of introns. So here you have the snRNPs which mainly take place, which mainly play a role. They are U1 and U2 snRNPs, and they initiate the phosphorylation. And basically what happens is that in the step 1, what happens is that the branch point, a nucleotide in the intron sequence attacks the 5' splice site and cleaves it. A nucleotide in the intron sequence attacks the splice site and cleaves it. The nucleotide, which is a nucleotide uh, in the in the intron sequence. So this is the GUAG sequence that will attach the splice site and cleave it. So here you have an inactive spliceosome which is formed. So here you have an inactive spliceosome. Then in the presence of ATP, so ATP hydrolysis, what happens is that this inactive spliceosome becomes an active spliceosome, and then this particular intron would be then cleaved. So you have GU and AG. This is the intron which has to be removed. So these two SNRNPs or SNRPs forms an inactive spliceosome, and you have the branch point, the attack of the spliceosome, and it attaches to the 3' splice site and cleaves it. So once it cleaves it, what happens is that it forms the inactive spliceosome. Then what happens is that in the presence of this ATP, an inorganic phosphate molecule would be added, and then it forms an active spliceosome. So this is the splicing mechanism of group 3 introns. Next, coming to group 4 introns, they are found in certain tRNAs, okay, transfer RNAs, and they require ATP and an endonuclease enzyme for their action. Next, coming to alternative splicing. So during RNA splicing, what happens is that the introns usually cut, right? And the exons are ligated together. So most of the pre-mRNAs are spliced constitutively. That is, most of the pre-mRNAs are spliced. Usually it takes place. That's a normal process which takes place. Okay. But in some cases, what happens is that you have certain alternate 5' or 3' splice sites are used during splicing, okay, resulting in the production of more than one mRNA species from a single pre-mRNA. Usually from a single mRNA, pre-mRNA, how many mRNA this mRNA is formed? Only one. But in certain cases, what happens is that alternative 5' or 3' splice sites are used during splicing. So this creates what happens? It results in the production of more than one mRNA species. So that is what is happening. So here you have two splice sites. So here you have, this is one splice site, this is another one. So here cleavage and polyadenylation takes place, and two mRNAs will be mainly formed. So alternative splicing has been seen on, what is this process of alternative splicing? It is defined as the production of RNA products from a single product by changes in the usage of splicing junctions. That is, depending upon the splicing junctions, the splicing junctions can be changed, and depending upon that number of the splicing junctions, the number of the production of the different RNA products. So here you have two RNA molecules which are mainly formed. So this is the alternative splicing. So alternative splicing has been seen in the case of most of the eukaryotic genes. So there are certain variations to alternative splicing also. That is depending upon the position of the promoters and the splice sites also. You have alternative 5' splice site. You have a cassette exon, sometimes which is mainly formed. You have mutually exclusive exons. So these are certain variations to the splice site. Don't bother much about this. This is just from a paper, Nature Reviews. So you should know what alternative splicing is and why is it important. Okay. So the importance of alternative splicing, it mainly helps in the regulation of gene expression, and it is also responsible for tissue specific expression. Okay. So the best example for this regulated alternative splicing is in the case of Drosophila. Drosophila is a fruit fly, and the sex determination in the case of Drosophila, the best example is it is seen in the case of the Drosophila. That is to determine whether the sex determination in Drosophila it mainly depends upon 3 gene products. Okay, so it depends upon the splicing mechanism for it to be determined whether it forms a male fly or a female Drosophila fly. Okay. So then coming to post-transcriptional modification of snRNAs. So they are usually snRNAs are usually synthesized as pre-snRNAs by RNA polymerase II, and they are processed by the ribonuclease. And you have the 2'-O' methylation and conversion of uridine. Uridine will be converted to pseudouridine. These are the most common modifications of the nucleosides. So coming to, okay, this is RNase P. Okay, so here you have a pre-tRNA, tRNA splicing. So tRNA splicing is somewhat different. Okay, splicing mechanism in the case of pre-tRNA differs from mechanisms utilized by self-splicing introns and splicing spliceosomes. So there is a slight modification in the pre-tRNA splicing. So here you have an exon, intron, and an exon. So what happens is that the endonuclease removes this intron from the mRNA, from the tRNA. Then you have the exon. So this exon 1 and exon 2. So the exon 2 will be acted upon by a kinase enzyme, and further it would be phosphorylated. Then a ligase acts on it, and a 5' polyadenylation takes place, and then it will be ligated on. In the presence of the ligase enzyme, it will be joined to the exon 1, and in the presence of the enzyme phosphotransferase, a mature tRNA will be mainly formed. So this is how the tRNA is mainly modified. So the trinucleotide CCA is added to the 3' end to give the 3' OHACC terminus. And this process of the tRNA is catalyzed by specific nucleotidyl transferase. So there are several enzymes here, but commonly it is the ligase enzyme, the kinase, the phosphotransferase enzyme, and also the nucleotidyl transferase enzyme, which plays a role in the catalysis or the modifications of the tRNA. So to conclude today's class, the 5' cap and the poly A tail are added to the primary transcript to mainly protect the mRNA from digestion. 5' cap is added to the 5' end of the primary mRNA transcript, and the poly A tail is added to the 3' end. And there are regions known as exons and non-coding regions or junk DNA, which are called introns. And there are several mechanisms of removing them. So the spliceosomes are made up of RNA and protein and cut out introns and join the remaining exons together. Okay. So eukaryotes undergo post-transcriptional modifications, mainly including capping, polyadenylation, and splicing. These events do not occur in prokaryotes. So you should remember that all these events do not occur in prokaryotes. They are exclusively seen only in the case of eukaryotes. Okay. So that's all about today's class.